The Underground, Ideas into Action presents an Underground Chat, where we bring the underground conversation to you. Today's chat, the Australian and U.S. Connection, Part 1 of 3, with Mark Worthington, CEO of Australian Mutual Bank.
Well, I think that that's a good place to start, though. You and I met in Thailand, in Bangkok, I think for the first time, and we had the opportunity to be part of the Asian Confederation of Credit. It's Asian Confederation Credit Union Association, right?
The full name is the Association of Asian Confederation of Credit Unions, but really just Asian Confederation of Credit Unions, ACCU, Asian Confederation of Credit Unions.
Excellent. Well, we met there and we had an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit. And one of the things that I wanted to mention to you as we got started today was I had the opportunity to sit in on your governance session, and you were working with the group on board governance, and you told stories. And I came up to you afterwards and introduced myself because I was fascinated with not only the work you do, but also the story and the influence and your volunteer work that you do to help other associations. So, so thank you for that. So will you, before we start with some of the ideas and things, tell us a little bit about you and your mutual bank and a little of that background.
Sure. So the long story, I've been working in this industry since 1982, which is an awful long time, explains the grey hair. Our organisation, Australian Mutual Bank, is the merger of, we've calculated this, 72 other credit unions have merged over history to create what we are at the moment. And mergers aren't over. We're still not of a size where our independence is assured. But our organisation, based in Sydney, we have 22 branches, 70,000 members, about 1.6 billion assets. We're about the 20th largest in Australia, although there are only 70 credit unions in Australia. Australia's attachment to Asia or to social responsibility. Originally, I did the DE course in 1994. From that development education course, I participated in some work in the Pacific. That was in Fiji, in Samoa, Tonga, and in Tuvalu, a tiny speck in the middle of the Pacific. And from there, an attachment with the Asian Association occurred in the early 2000s, and we redirected some resources towards Lenny and Ranjith's development activities. And so I've been fortunate enough to attend many Asian forums and participate with our credit union colleagues from all over Asia, and it's been great. I really enjoy it. It's as you know, it's a hugely rewarding activity to participate in, and it's rewarding for us because it really, puts our feet back on the ground. It grounds us in what our cooperative organisations were really all about, and it helps. Many of the occasions when I'm talking to our Asian colleagues, I tell them about the mistakes we've made and how to watch out for them so that they don't make them, so that they can learn from those mistakes, not necessarily learning from what we're doing right, but learning from what we did wrong is probably more important.
That's an interesting observation, because we have, as one of our core values, if you will, to share both what we're doing in terms of the good things, but we also take a look and examine and have vulnerable collaboration around the things that we've learned. And I think, we try not to say worst practices, but the reality is that I think we learn more from some of the tough experiences we have in our lives than we do from, kind of taking for granted the good stuff. So I want to start with the idea that Americans and Australians, we have this connection. And I know that Mike and my business partner and my husband, he absolutely adores Australia, and we've been there a few times. And so not only have we connected offshore, if you will, and other places around the world, but we love Australia. So tell us a little bit about why we get along so well. Why do we connect?
Well, I think we'll really. I think we just understand each other, don't we? That's and not just Well, we do have trouble with your southern accents and northeastern, well, the others as well, for that matter, western and northern. We have, but deep down, I think we understand each other. We get each other. We speak the same language, and we're familiar. We're similar in other strange ways. Okay, so what I'd like to do is just share this screen. So we are similar in terms of geographic size. Susan, if I can get this going. There we go. Okay, so we're similar in terms of geographic size. Here's to scale mainland USA with Australia.
Wow.
And you'll see there that coast to coast is very, very similar, even north to south. The geographic area is it's within a few percent of each other. But in terms of population, we are significantly different. I mean, you have 13 times our population. We're only 25 million. And when I was thinking about this, I looked at it and thought, well, actually, we are less than your second most populous state in Texas. So the whole of Australia's population could fit into Texas with 4 million people to spare. And we have, countries the same geographic size. In terms of the number of credit unions, now this might be a little outdated because I know you're having lots of mergers in the US, but there's about 5,400 in the US, but we only have 72. That's probably less than now. We had a maximum of about 830 in the mid-80s, and we have rationalised dramatically, and I'll talk about that later and the reasons for that. Then there are credit union aggregate assets. So in the US, it's 1,500 billion, which is huge, and Australia is only 81 billion US dollars by comparison. Although if you made that relative by multiplying it by the population differences, it's not as significant as it appears, but we're still quite small. Australia, by the way, remains the third largest credit union sector or country in the world in US dollars, behind the USA and Canada. I think Korea, as you know, South Korea comes in fourth.
So an asset size, huh? Okay.
On total asset size, yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the average credit union asset size. If we looked at the averages, you would then, from simple arithmetic, work out that in the US, the average credit union size is less than 300 million, whereas in Australia, the average credit union size is over US dollars 1.1 billion. And that makes my organisation pretty well on average, actually. And there's a couple of reasons for that, which we'll come to, about why those sizes are so different. But in terms of connection, let me just go back to a connection story, because this is one that not many people know about. And perhaps, Susan, when you do show this or to your participants, you might give them 10 seconds or so to unmute and to tell you the meaning of these three words. You'd have to say no Googling. You'd only give them 10 seconds so that whoever recognises it could come back in. So anyone? Tricky though. I mean, this is actually a trick question, because Carlos Norman Smith is actually three people, and they are famous for this photo. And this photo is the 1968 Olympics, and this is the 200-metre men's final. Medal ceremony, and on the left we've got Australia's Peter Norman. He won the silver medal. In the middle is the gold medal winning Tommy Smith, and on the right there is a bronze medal winning John Carlos. Now, not many people know the story of the Australian in this photograph. He was 26 years old at the time. He was a devout Christian, deeply sympathetic to the Black Rights Movement and to racial equality. and to the Olympic Project for Human Rights. His support for Tommy Smith and John Carlos was to wear the Olympic Project for Human Rights badge, which I've highlighted there, all three of them wearing it. He was quoted at the time as saying, he said, "I think most Australians would favour what I did. At least I hope they do. I believe in civil rights. Every man is born equal and should be treated as such. I thought this was a good chance to be on their side." So that was him. That was Peter Norman, the man. But he was punished terribly for this, for not only wearing that badge, but for his words afterwards. He never represented Australia again, despite being qualifying times for the 72 Olympics. His 200-metre record still stands as the Australian record today, 52 years later, which is just unbelievable. The issue for Australia, and this is one of our negative things in our history, is that we had a white Australia policy right up until 1966, and that meant that we really only accepted migrants from Northern and Northwestern Europe. So the White Australia policy only ended 2 years earlier, and Peter Norman was effectively just cut off from the Australian Olympic movement after that, and never competed for Australia again. But anyway, these three became lifelong friends. They were connected by that iconic moment, and here's a bit of the sad part. On the sad occasion of Peter's passing in 2006, they both made eulogies and were pallbearers at his funeral. And it was only in 2012, Susan, 6 years after he died, that the Australian government made a formal apology to Peter and his family for his treatment since 1968. Anyway, we bring it up to date, and we can say that 52 years later, Black lives still matter, and the USA Track and Field Association produced this shirt only this month. You'll notice there on the left from my screen grab. They continue to recognise Peter Norman for his wearing of that human rights badge in solidarity with Smith and Carlos, which is great. And so Australians are pretty proud of Peter Norman. Not only for his sporting prowess, of course, but for the stance that he took, and for his participation in what I think is a very special but little known Australian and American connection. So there you go.
Wow.
So how's that story?
Oh, I'm sitting here like tearing up. I think of the price that people pay to stand up at times that they feel compelled. It's not always. We were just having a conversation about event-driven opportunities that can become lifelong opportunities. And I was just thinking, as you were showing me that he stepped in, he stood up, he presented himself at a time when he had to have known that he was going to have the reaction that he, maybe not to the extent that he ended up having, but anyway, from an American perspective, that is probably one of the reasons that we love our Aussie friends, is that you're bold, you're untraditional in the sense of caring and stepping in.
Yeah, not all Australians are as forward-thinking and progressive as Peter Norman, that's for sure. But that said, I think as time goes by, history looks back on people like that very, very favourably.
Yeah, they do, and I think that it's a wonderful opportunity when that type of mission-based work, purpose-based work, brings people together. I mean, who knew that we'd connect and be able, over the last, really, it's been 5-6 years that we've had an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit, and all based upon our common purpose, which is wanting to make a difference and volunteer. So, and our respect has grown. I think that, and what I mean by that is that you have an opportunity, and I heard the impact that you had as a mentor and a supporter of our colleague Lenny in Asia, I knew that you had brought her along, and not that sounds. But what I meant by that is you've mentored and you gave of yourself freely and you've been a volunteer. So that was always important to me. And then as time went on, I got to see the action behind it. And I think that's when you start to truly appreciate people. And, you know, if I look at it from the standpoint of our first encounter, if you will, with Global Women's Leadership Network, it was like, okay, you know, here's what Sue's doing and who is she, other than they're doing a karaoke get together when I arrived. But then over time, we've been able to see the impact, you know, and appreciate the work that we do. So thank you for that. So that's where I want to go next. I have a deep appreciation for your perspective, and I would like to start macro. We sometimes think that credit unions are financial transactors, and you know, from a transaction standpoint, and we'll go there in a few minutes, but I'd like to talk globally and think about the difference of what's going on in the world today. And so Australia has, we have an affinity, and so I was just wondering, what do you think are the key issues that Australia is dealing with, and how do they relate to where we are today?
So, look, I can. I hope I'm not going to be too controversial with some of the things that I might talk about here, Susan. There are some differences between the ways in which you know, the US functions and the way Australia functions, and our different collective outlooks. One thing, I know you're in the middle of your election season, for whatever better description. In Australia, you know, we have compulsory voting, for example, which is completely different from what you would have in the US. Our view, I mean, the view is, you know, everyone's got to go to school, everyone pays tax, everyone votes. You want to participate in this democracy, then it's your civic duty to vote. And there are those people who say that, you know, it's an infringement on their freedom somehow. Well, if they want to rebel, they can always go into the ballot box and draw little pictures in the boxes. I mean, we don't care if that's what they think freedom is. But really, it's a matter of forcing or encouraging people to participate. And if you know you have to vote, you might take more interest in what's going on. And it's not that we had 100% turnout, but it's never been lower than 90%, and it often averages about 94% of eligible voters. So that's a difference that we have here. Also, we don't have.
At what age, Mark?
18. 18
years old. Yeah.
18. And we don't have any. I've looked with a bit of dismay at some of the sort of suppression activities that occurs in the US, which I hope doesn't translate here. But there is no one. The only people who are prevented from voting in Australia are those who are currently serving a prison term of 3 years or more. So even if you're in prison serving a term of less than 3 years, you still vote. And if you have served a term and have come out, then you can vote. It's only those who are in prison serving a term of greater than 3 years. So it's pretty inclusive in terms of ensuring that our outcomes represent the citizenry. Look, a second difference, and I know this is a long-term factor in the US that's always been considered as universal healthcare. Now, we have universal healthcare in Australia. We have what we call Medicare, but it's for everyone. It's not dissimilar to the UK's NHS, National Health Service. And it provides either free or low-cost access to medical services from doctors, specialists, other health professionals. It doesn't include dental, but it does include all prescription medicines as well. For example, with drugs, if you're pretty well every prescription drug is available for about $41. And if you're a retiree or you're on some form of welfare, it's $7. And that includes treatments that might be $1,000 a month, for example.
Wow.
So if someone's unfortunate enough to need an arthritis injection at $1,000 a month, then they pay $41 for it. Through our pharmaceutical benefit scheme, which is part of our Medicare system. Now we pay for that, obviously. Every income earning citizen pays 2% on top of their marginal rate for, and it's 2% of their total income for our Medicare system. So I know there's there's tax differences. We pay a lot more tax than you would do in the US, as I understand it. I mean, our tax-free threshold is about $20,000, but our top rate, excuse me, our top rate comes in at $180,000, and that's 45%. So whilst the bottom don't pay tax up to 20 grand, but over 180, you're going to pay 45% plus the 2% Medicare levy. So we do pay. I suspect we pay a lot more tax, but no one particularly seems to mind because we value this. And it's not to say that you can't have private health. You can have private health insurance on top of the universal system, and that might be because if you want to have some elective surgery or non-urgent surgery, dental, you can insure for dental activity. Choice of doctor is all through the private part. So the options are there. There's two systems, but the fallback one is the one that we won't allow governments to remove. And no one in Australia ever becomes bankrupt because of medical bills. It just doesn't happen. They don't delay medical treatment because of the cost, and they don't become bankrupt.
With having universal health care, there wasn't a question of some people not getting access to health care during the pandemic. So did that help with your Australia being able to respond faster?
Sure, it's not an issue at all. It's the government put together a response that COVID testing is free. The results are within 24 hours. We're now down to the government in New South Wales is now analysing the DNA of the virus to then check on which strains are being passed through who, and tracking. That's part of the contact tracing, is actually DNA testing of the virus. So all of that's free, and the government has already said that in their purchasing of vaccines that they will be provided for free as well when they become available. So we pay for this. Everybody pays for it in one way or another, and 2% on my wage is more than what 2% on a young person's wage might be. But that's just the way it is. That's just the contribution to the well-being of everybody. I think we look at health here like in Maslow's hierarchy. We look at health and safety as human rights, not just so. So that's why I think, and despite that there is some conservative efforts to break that Medicare system down and privatise it so that profit can be made from it for some, the resistance is too great. Governments don't go down that path because they know they won't be re-elected if they do.
So it's institutionalized. All right, so let's tackle a really tough one. Tell me about gun control taking place,
Yeah, guns. Well, this is another one that we have substantial differences. In Australia, there was a massacre of 35 people. This occurred in 1996 in Port Arthur in Tasmania, and it was a person who was mentally afflicted. The person was clearly insane, but managed to shoot 35 people. As a result of that, the government, and it was a conservative government at the time, they organised for a ban on automatic and semi-automatic guns. That was pretty well straight away. They implemented a 28-day waiting period for the purchase of any weapons, and they bought back and destroyed 750,000 guns. And all weapons are now registered. I mean, there was a politician at the time said something like, we register cars, we register boats, we even register dogs. He said, we're going to register guns. And so they do. And so since that time, that's 24 years ago, there's only been 2 mass shootings that have resulted in more than 5 people or more than 4 people being killed. And both of those were by male farmers. And I think they had legitimate access to those weapons anyway. But suffice to say, it's worked. And I think, without being too controversial here, I think that most Australians would think that the individual right to own a gun is outweighed by the collective right not to get shot. So that would be the general consensus there. Now there's the periphery of politics where people want to reintroduce guns and try to pick up on your constitutional amendment there, and we do have some of our crackpot political people going over and visiting the NRA and whatnot. But they don't seem to get very far. But they are chipping away at the edges, which is a bit sad. But anyway, we'll see how they go.
Well, I think being in the U.S. and for me, seeing the massacre in Las Vegas and how close that came to all of our family and friends and people from around the world, and then obviously seeing some of the school shootings are heartbreaking. And I believe, and we're also a family that understands the Constitution and the right to bear arms. So it's one of those moments in time where we have a tendency to look at what I call the outliers instead of looking at the fundamental humanity of sickness, of death, of some of the things that are a direct result based upon these practices that are affected by groups that are outliers to the general population. And that's going to be, we're having a day of reckoning, if you will, Mother Earth tilting, our environment. I mean, there's so many issues that globally we have to work together on that I find the credit union movement to be a place that we can start, we do take action. And